My sister made fun of my allergy right in front of everyone, then served me soup filled with crab. What she didn't notice was a billionaire CEO already on the phone with 911, holding an EpiPen in his hand. Imagine you're choking, gasping for air, your throat closing up, and the person who did it, your own sister, is laughing in your face, telling everyone you're just faking it. That's exactly what happened to me, and it almost cost me my life. I was at this unbelievably fancy party, the kind where crystal glasses clink and every smile feels calculated, celebrating my sister Sloane's big promotion to public relations director. Me? I'm Sailor Cole, an antique book restoration expert. My world is usually quiet, dusty, filled with centuries-old paper, not designer suits and blinding spotlights. I was completely out of place, even before my throat started making this awful, wheezing sound, like a broken kettle. Sloan was up on a small podium, her perfect teeth gleaming, that practiced PR smile plastered on her face, but it never quite reached her eyes. She leaned into the microphone, a theatrical sigh dripping from her voice. "Here we go again," she announced to the room. "Sailor, don't make a scene. It's just mushroom soup. There's no crab. Or do you want to ruin my promotion party?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the room. Sloan thought she'd scored points, playing to the crowd, basking in their attention. She always did. But what she didn't see was the man sitting directly across from me. Magnus Thorne, the group chairman, the very man who'd just signed off on her promotion, was staring at my soup bowl with absolute horror. You see, Magnus' daughter has a deadly shellfish allergy. He knows what anaphylaxis looks like. He knows what happens when someone's airway starts to close. Before I could even process what was happening, Magnus was moving. He pulled an EpiPen from the inside pocket of his $5,000 suit and rushed towards me with a speed that seemed impossible for a 58-year-old. But to really understand that terrifying moment and why I was in this near-death situation, we need to go back a few hours earlier that evening. This was supposed to be an intimate dinner party celebrating Sloane's promotion in the VIP room of Etoile, a 3-Michelin-starred restaurant. Reservations there usually require a 3-month wait and a credit card with no limit. The room itself was gorgeous, bathed in dim, golden light, everything looking like it belonged in a luxury magazine. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, walls lined with dark wood paneling. It reeked of old money and new ambition. I'm 26. Despite my age, I've actually made a name for myself in academic circles. They call me the surgeon for history because of my methodical approach, my ruthless logic, and my deep understanding of ancient preservation. I work with materials that are centuries old, treating them with the precision most people reserve for defusing bombs. My hands have saved manuscripts that survived wars, floods, and fires. My job demands patience, silence, and a profound respect for the fragility of beautiful things. My sister Sloan, on the other hand, is 29. She'd just been promoted to PR director at Thorne Global, a massive multinational corporation. She's all glamorous exterior, designer clothes, perfect hair, a smile she can turn on and off like a light switch. Where I am quiet and careful, she is loud and reckless. Where I preserve, she destroys. Our parents, Alastair and Cordelia Cole, are 60 and famously vain. They sat at that table, beaming at Sloane's new title, basking in her reflected glory. They loved to talk about Sloane's important career, her connections, her visibility. Meanwhile, they constantly looked down on my work, dismissing it as dusty or depressing because they don't understand its true value. To them, I am the disappointing daughter who chose books over boardrooms. The tension that led to my poisoning, and yes, let's call it what it was, poisoning, began even before the party really started. Sloan had been in the restaurant's lobby when Magnus Thorne arrived. She tried to intercept him, to pull him aside and show him some media report about Thorne Global's latest acquisition. She wanted his attention. She wanted his praise. Instead, Magnus spotted me near the coat check, and his face lit up with genuine interest. He walked right past Sloan and spent a full 20 minutes discussing the deacidification process of ancient paper with me. He asked detailed questions about pH balance, alkalization treatments, the difference between European and Asian paper fibers. He was absolutely fascinated. He even told me about a collection of 18th century letters his company had recently acquired and asked if I would consider consulting on their preservation. I watched Sloane's face throughout that conversation. I saw the way her jaw tightened. I saw the way her fingers curled into fists at her sides. I saw the rage building behind her eyes. This was supposed to be her night. Her moment. And here I was, the little sister with the boring job, stealing the attention of the most important person in the room. Sloane's jealousy was insane. And dangerous. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to prove to everyone that I was weak, or worse, that I was faking my allergy to manipulate others, to get attention, to make everything about me. She genuinely believed that a little crab essence wouldn't kill anyone. She thought it would just make me itch a little, maybe cause some hives. She wanted me to lose face in front of Magnus, in front of our parents, in front of everyone who mattered. So, she set her trap. I didn't see it happen then, but I pieced it together later from witness statements. Sloan excused herself from the table about 30 minutes before the soup course. She found Chef Bastion in the kitchen, a man famous for his creative interpretations of classic French cuisine. "Chef Bastion," she cooed, turning on that megawatt PR smile, "I have a special request. I've heard everyone praising your famous crab fat oil, the one you use in your signature bouillabaisse. It's supposed to be incredible." Chef Bastion, naturally, nodded, pleased. His crab fat oil was famous, made by slowly rendering the roe and fat from blue crabs, infused with aromatics until it became this liquid, amber-colored gold, rich and intensely flavorful. I was wondering, Sloan continued, if today, on this important day for me, I could experience something truly special. Could you add just a touch of that crab oil to the truffle mushroom soup? I think the combination would be extraordinary. Novel. Unexpected. Chef Bastion was surprised, of course. Crab and truffle isn't a traditional pairing. But he was also a creative chef, always willing to experiment for clients who showed genuine interest. He thought about it for a moment. The umami of crab fat, the earthiness of truffle, the sweetness of mushrooms. It could work. "For you, Miss Cole, on your special evening," he said with a small bow, "I'll prepare one bowl with the crab oil as an amuse-bouche before the main soup course." Sloan beamed. "Thank you so much. You're an artist." What Chef Bastion didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was the conspiracy behind that request. He had no idea that Sloan had a sister with a life-threatening shellfish allergy. He had no idea that the bowl he was so carefully preparing would be used as a weapon. When the soup arrived, it was beautiful. The waiter, a young man named Andy, placed the bowls carefully on the table. Mine had those gorgeous reddish-brown oil swirls on top, catching the candlelight and shimmering like melted copper. Sloan leaned over to me, her voice soft, sisterly. "I asked Chef Bastion to add a little smoked chili oil and pine mushroom extract to yours," she said. "I know you find rich food overwhelming sometimes, so I thought this would make it easier for you to eat. The chili adds a nice warmth without being too heavy." I should have known better. I'm a cautious person by nature. It's part of what makes me good at my job. When you work with materials that are 400 years old, you learn to question everything, to test every solution, to verify every procedure. But this time, I was negligent. My sister's feigned enthusiasm, the luxurious space, the golden lighting, it all deceived my senses. And the soup itself was a perfect deception. The intense scent of truffle mushrooms filled my nostrils, earthy and overwhelming. The amber color of the crab fat oil looked exactly like truffle oil. The mushroom scent completely masked any slight fishy smell I might have otherwise detected. I suspected absolutely nothing. I picked up my spoon and ate a small mouthful. The taste was incredible. Rich, savory, complex. For about 5 seconds, I thought Sloan had actually done something kind for me. Then my throat began to close. The reaction was immediate. And violent. My throat constricted like someone had wrapped a fist around my windpipe and was squeezing with all their strength. My lips started to tingle, then burn, then swell. I could feel my tongue thickening in my mouth, blocking my airway. My skin erupted in hives, angry, red welts that spread across my arms and chest like wildfire. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't support me. The room tilted sideways. I fell from my chair, hitting the plush carpet hard enough to knock the wind out of me, or what little wind I had left. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. All I could do was claw at my throat and make these horrible wheezing sounds that didn't sound human. And through it all, I could hear my sister laughing. Not a nervous laugh. Not an "oh no, what have I done" laugh. A triumphant laugh. "See?" Sloan said, her voice carrying across the VIP room. "See? She's eating mushrooms and pretending to be allergic to crab." This year's Oscar for Best Actress goes to Sailor Cole. There was uncertain laughter from some guests. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure if this was a family joke or something far more serious. "Come on, Sailor," Sloan continued, walking closer to where I was writhing on the floor. "You can drop the act now. You've got everyone's attention. Isn't that what you wanted? To make my special night all about you." I tried to look at her. Tried to make her see that this wasn't an act. That I was dying. But my vision was starting to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges of my sight. This is how it ends, I thought. Killed by my own sister at a dinner party. While everyone watches and thinks it's a joke. But Magnus Thorne was already there. Before I had even fully hit the floor, he had dropped to his knees beside me, the EpiPen already in his hand. "Move," he shouted, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Someone call an ambulance." "Now." He looked at me, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Hold still," he said. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." He pulled the cap off the EpiPen and jabbed it into my thigh, right through my dress. The needle punched through fabric and skin, and I felt the rush of epinephrine flooding my system like ice water in my veins. The effect wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. The crushing pressure on my throat eased just slightly. Just enough for me to drag in a thin, whistling breath. "Ambulance! Ambulance!" Magnus shouted again, looking around at the stunned staff. "Call emergency services right now, and someone get me oxygen if you have it." The restaurant manager was already on his phone, stammering the address to the emergency dispatcher. A waiter ran to get the first aid kit from behind the bar. Magnus looked down at me, his face grim. "Stay with me," he said. "The ambulance is coming. You're going to make it." While everyone was panicking, while the room erupted into controlled chaos, I saw Sloane's face change. The smug satisfaction drained away. Her smile faltered. She looked at Magnus kneeling beside me, at the EpiPen in his hand, at the way my lips had swollen to twice their normal size. She was beginning to realize that her prank had gone much, much further than she intended. I didn't think," she stammered, backing up a step. My mother rushed over, her face pale. "What happened? What's wrong with her?" "She's having anaphylactic shock," Magnus said sharply. "Someone put shellfish in her food. This isn't a joke or an exaggeration. Without this epinephrine, she would be dead in minutes." My father looked at the soup bowl, then at Sloan. I saw the moment comprehension dawned on his face. "Sloan," he said slowly. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Sloan said quickly. "I just asked for mushroom soup. There wasn't supposed to be any crab in it." But before she could continue her denial, Andy the waiter appeared at her elbow. "Miss Sloan," he said hesitantly, "do you want me to clear the table? You asked me to have everything ready to clean up after." "Not now." Sloan snapped at him. That was when the adrenaline hit me properly. The epinephrine from the EpiPen was doing its job, forcing my heart to pump faster, opening my airways, giving me back a fraction of my strength. And with that strength came absolute clarity. I reached out and grabbed Magnus Thorne's wrist with surprising force, my fingers locked around his expensive watch like a vice. He looked down at me, startled. I couldn't speak yet, my throat was still too swollen, but I could communicate. I pointed at the soup bowl with my free hand. Then I made a fist and held it up, the universal sign for keep, or hold, or preserve. Magnus understood immediately. He might not have been a police officer or a lawyer, but he was a billionaire who had built an empire on his ability to read situations and act decisively. He knew exactly what I was telling him. And no one touches that soup, he roared, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Security. Seal this table. This is a crime scene. The restaurant security guards, who had been hovering uncertainly at the edges of the room, immediately sprang into action. They formed a barrier around the table, preventing anyone from approaching. Mr. Thorne, Sloan said, forcing a laugh. Isn't that a bit dramatic? It's just a misunderstanding. Nothing leaves this room. Magnus interrupted her, his voice cold as Arctic ice. Not the dishes, not the soup, not a single napkin. Everything stays exactly where it is until the authorities arrive. My mother grabbed Sloan's arm. Tell me you didn't do this on purpose, she whispered urgently. Tell me this was an accident. Sloan opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Her face had gone sheet white. I lay on the floor, still holding Magnus' wrist, and felt a grim satisfaction spread through me despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the fact that I could barely breathe. I had used my last bit of strength to preserve the most important evidence, the soup that nearly killed me, the proof of what my sister had done. That was my first small victory before the darkness started to creep in at the edges of my vision again. The last thing I remember before the paramedics arrived was Magnus leaning over me, his hand steady on my shoulder, and saying, "You're a fighter. Good. You're going to need that." The paramedics worked on me right there in the VIP room, while Magnus gave orders like a general commanding troops. They gave me another dose of epinephrine, hooked me up to oxygen, checked my vital signs. My blood pressure was dangerously low. My oxygen saturation was in the 70s. It should have been in the 90s. "We need to transport immediately," one of the paramedics said. "She needs to be in the ER under observation. Anaphylaxis can have a biphasic reaction. She could crash again in a few hours." But before they could wheel me out on the stretcher, Magnus turned to face Sloan. His expression was carved from stone. "You said this was normal mushroom soup?" he asked her, his voice deadly quiet. Sloan's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. "Yes," she said, but her voice cracked on the word. "Of course it was normal mushrooms. The girl always overreacts to everything. She's probably just having a panic attack." "A panic attack doesn't cause your airway to close," Magnus said flatly. "A panic attack doesn't require an EpiPen. Stop lying." That was when Chef Bastion burst into the VIP room. He had been in the kitchen when Andy informed him that there had been a medical emergency involving the soup and that a guest was allergic to shellfish. The words had hit him like a physical blow. "Miss Sloan," he said, his face flushed with distress and confusion. "The waiter just told me what happened. But I don't understand. You requested the crab fat oil yourself. You asked me to add it to the truffle soup. You said it was your special request." A tense hush cut through the chaos of the banquet room. Every eye turned to Sloan. "You said you liked it," Chef Bastion continued, not realizing he was signing her death warrant with every word. "You said it would be novel and unexpected. I thought you wanted to try it." Andy stepped forward then, the young waiter who had been serving our table all evening. "And Miss Sloan signaled for me to place that specific bowl in front of Miss Saylor," he added quietly. "I remember because you made very clear eye contact with me and pointed to her seat." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. I lay on the stretcher, the oxygen mask covering half my face, and I watched my family's illusions collapse in real time. My father's face had gone gray. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They were staring at Sloan like they had never seen her before. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't even negligence. This was a deliberate trap, carefully planned and coldly executed. "Sloan," my father said, his voice hollow. "Tell me they're wrong. Tell me you didn't do this on purpose." Sloan looked around the room wildly, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. "I just thought. I mean, she always makes such a big deal about her allergy. I thought if she just had a tiny bit, she'd realize she's been exaggerating all these years. I thought it would just make her a little uncomfortable, maybe get some hives. I never meant for it to be this serious." "You never meant to almost kill your sister?" Magnus said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Is that your defense? It was supposed to be harmless." Sloane's voice was rising now, becoming shrill. She's always been so dramatic about everything. I just wanted her to stop being the center of attention for once. This is my night, my promotion, and she has to make it all about her and her stupid allergy. Shut up, my father said. I had never heard him speak to Sloan that way before. In our family, Sloan was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. My father's harsh tone shocked everyone into silence. We need to leave, one of the paramedics said urgently. Her condition could deteriorate. She needs to be in a hospital. They started wheeling me toward the door. As I passed my family, I looked each of them in the eye. My mother was crying, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. And Sloan? Sloan looked terrified. Good, I thought. Be terrified. The most sophisticated toxicity doesn't come from slaps or obvious violence. It comes from actions that are sugar-coated in the name of care. When someone deliberately tests your safety boundaries, when they play with your life and call it a joke, they aren't joking. They're showing you exactly who they are. I had spent 26 years being the understanding younger sister. The quiet one. The one who didn't make waves or cause scenes. The one who accepted being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed because keeping the peace was easier than fighting back. But as those ambulance doors closed and the sirens started wailing, something fundamental shifted inside me. Sloan wasn't just jealous. She was willing to risk my life, genuinely risk ending it, just to satisfy her ego, just to punish me for daring to be good at something, for daring to be interesting to someone who mattered. And my parents, who had always defended Sloan, who had always made excuses for her cruelty and dismissed my hurt feelings as oversensitivity, they could no longer deny the naked truth that had just been laid bare before their eyes. I felt a coldness spread through me, and it had nothing to do with the anaphylaxis. It was the cold that comes when emotional bonds snap like overstretched rubber bands. It was the ice that forms when you finally, stop lying to yourself about people you love. The paramedic adjusted my oxygen mask. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. I couldn't speak yet, my throat was still too swollen, and the damage to my vocal cords would take weeks to heal, but I raised my hand and made a gesture that she interpreted as okay. I wasn't okay, though. Not physically, and certainly not emotionally. But I was clear-eyed. I was done being the submissive younger sister who accepted crumbs of affection and swallowed injuries in silence. I would handle this the way I handle a book that's been eaten by mold, with ruthless precision, removing every trace of the harmful agent until nothing remained but clean paper. Sloan had tried to destroy me. Instead, she had freed me. Now I would show her what happens when you push someone who has spent their whole life being careful, being controlled, being quiet. You don't get an explosion. You get something far worse. You get precision. The chaos spilled out from the restaurant lobby onto the sidewalk just as the ambulance doors were being prepped to receive me. Magnus Thorne stood near the rear of the vehicle, his phone already in his hand, his finger hovering over the number for his personal attorney, who also had direct connections to the district attorney's office. "I'm calling the police," he announced. Sloan had followed us out, pushing past the security team, desperate to control the narrative. Her heels clicked frantically on the pavement. This is attempted murder, or at the very least, aggravated assault. Ms. Cole will be arrested tonight. Sloan went white as paper. The last traces of color in her cheeks drained away completely. "No," she whispered. "No, please, Mr. Thorne. It was a mistake. I didn't mean, you admitted to deliberately contaminating your sister's food with a substance you knew she was deathly allergic to," Magnus said. Coldly. "You did this at a company event, using company resources, while representing Thorne Global as our new PR director. If I call the police right now, you'll be in handcuffs before midnight. Your career will be over before it begins. And given the premeditated nature of this attack, you're looking at serious prison time." My mother grabbed Sloan's arm, her face crumpling. "Oh, my sweet girl, what have you done? What have you done?" My father stood frozen, his brain clearly trying to calculate the social and professional fallout of having a daughter arrested for attempted murder at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The scandal would be enormous. Inescapable. But I saw something else happening. I saw the way Magnus' hand tightened on his phone. I saw the way the other dinner guests were hovering nearby, their phones out, probably already texting their friends about the drama. I saw the restaurant manager wringing his hands, clearly terrified about the publicity nightmare this would create. And I saw my opportunity. Despite lying on the stretcher with my throat still swollen and my voice reduced to a hoarse rasp, I raised my hand. I clawed the oxygen mask down from my face. "Ma'am, please, keep that on," the paramedic insisted, trying to replace it. "You need the oxygen." I pushed her hand away weakly, but firmly. "Wait," I managed to croak out. The single word felt like swallowing broken glass. Magnus turned to look at me surprised. Everyone went silent, straining to hear what I would say. I looked directly at Magnus, my eyes clear despite everything my body had just been through. "Don't call the police." "Yet," I said. Each word a physical struggle. The paramedic was checking my monitors anxiously. "Arresting the PR director will cause Thorne Global's stock to plummet. I don't want to affect your assets." I took a ragged breath. "My lawyer will handle it tomorrow." The relief that flooded my family's faces was almost comical. My mother let out a sob of gratitude. "Oh, Sailor. Thank you. Thank you. You're such a good girl. Such a good sister." My father's shoulders sagged. "We'll work this out as a family. We'll sit down tomorrow and talk through everything calmly." "And Sloan?" Sloan looked at me with a mixture of relief and contempt. I could read her expression clearly. She thinks I'm weak. She thinks I'm too scared to press charges. She thinks family loyalty will win out in the end. "Sailor," she said, stepping closer to the ambulance, her voice taking on that sweet, manipulative tone she uses when she wants something. "I know you're upset right now, and you have every right to be. But we're sisters. We're family. We can work through this together. Maybe some therapy. Some family counseling." I held up my hand to stop her. When I spoke again, my voice was a breathless whisper, but crystal clear. "My lawyer will contact you with the terms." "Terms?" Sloan blinked, confused. "For the settlement," I clarified, fighting the urge to cough. "You're going to pay. For what you did. Every penny." Her face hardened. "You're going to sue me? Your own sister. Would you prefer prison?" I asked simply. 8 years? State facility? Or a civil settlement? Your choice." Magnus looked at me with something like approval in his eyes. "Your lawyer should call my office as well," he said. "I'll make sure Chef Bastion and Andy provide full statements about what happened tonight. Thorne Global will cooperate completely with any legal proceedings." "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," Magnus said quietly. "You saved yourself tonight. Preserving that evidence was smart. Most people in your situation would have been too panicked to think clearly." "I work with fragile things," I said, finally allowing the paramedic to replace the mask. "I know how to protect them." "We really need to go now," the paramedic said firmly, signaling the driver. "She needs to be under medical supervision." As the ambulance door started to close, I took one last look at my family standing on the sidewalk. They thought I had shown mercy. They thought I had chosen family over justice. They thought I was still the same quiet, accommodating sailor who always put their needs before her own. They were wrong. I needed time. Time to build an airtight case. Time to let them relax their guard. Time to gather every piece of evidence that would make what came next absolutely undeniable. Sloan thought working with a lawyer tomorrow meant some gentle negotiation, maybe a small payment to smooth things over, maybe an apology that would let us all move on and pretend this never happened. She had no idea what was coming. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The anaphylaxis had done more damage than the doctors initially realized. My vocal cords were inflamed and damaged from the swelling, leaving my voice hoarse and weak. I would need weeks of speech therapy to fully recover. The repeated doses of epinephrine had strained my heart, requiring cardiac monitoring. And psychologically, I was a mess. Nightmares of choking, panic attacks triggered by the smell of mushrooms, a bone-deep terror every time I had to eat anything. But I didn't rest. I didn't waste a single moment feeling sorry for myself. On the second day, while I was still hooked up to IVs and monitors, I had my lawyer, Mr. Lewis, visit me. He was a sharp, aggressive attorney in his mid-40s who specialized in civil litigation and personal injury cases. I had hired him 3 years ago to handle a contract dispute, and he had impressed me with his ruthless efficiency. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out his tablet to take notes. I told him. Every detail. Every moment. The conversation Magnus had with me that set off Sloan's jealousy. The way she had disappeared to speak with the chef. The soup that nearly killed me. The confession in front of witnesses. "This is airtight," Mr. Lewis said, his eyes gleaming. She confessed in front of a room full of people, including the CEO of a major corporation. We have the chef's testimony about her specific request to add crab oil. We have the server's testimony about her directing that bowl to your place. We have physical evidence in the form of the soup itself. And we have Magnus Thorne as a witness to your medical emergency and his immediate intervention. "I want affidavits from Chef Bastion and Andy," I said, my damaged voice barely above a whisper, in writing notarized, before they have a chance to be pressured by my family or anyone else. "Consider it done," Mr. Lewis said. "I'll have them within 48 hours. And I want a full medical report documenting every injury, the throat damage, the cardiac strain, the psychological trauma, everything. Already ordered. The hospital is cooperating fully." I looked at him steadily. "I want her destroyed, Mr. Lewis. Not hurt. Not embarrassed. Destroyed. I want her to lose everything she values, her career, her money, her reputation. I want my parents to understand exactly what their golden child is capable of. And I want it all done legally, cleanly, and completely." Mr. Lewis smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "How much are we asking for?" $900,000, I said without hesitation. "That's enough to ruin her financially, but not so much that it seems unreasonable to a mediator. It covers my medical expenses, lost income, pain and suffering, and the cost of psychiatric care. And it's just low enough that she'll think she's getting off easy." "You've thought this through." "I've had nothing but time to think," I said. "And one more thing. I want this settled in mediation, not in court. Court takes too long, and I want this done quickly. 3 weeks from tonight. Can you arrange that? For $900,000 in a clear-cut case? The defense will jump at mediation. They'll be terrified of what a jury would award." "Good," I said, because my silence isn't forgiveness. It's strategy. Mr. Lewis stood up, closing his tablet. "Your sister tried to kill you, Miss Cole. She deserves everything that's coming to her. She tried to diminish me," I corrected quietly. "She tried to make me small, to make me weak, to prove I was nothing. That's even worse than trying to kill me. Because she wanted me to survive it. She wanted me to live with the humiliation." I leaned back against the hospital pillows, suddenly exhausted. Instead, I continued, "She's going to learn what happens when you underestimate someone who spends their life working with things that are fragile but precious. You learn how to protect them. You learn how to repair them. And you learn how to remove anything that threatens them completely, permanently, and without mercy." My lawyer left with his marching orders. Over the next 2 weeks, while I recovered at home, he worked like a man possessed. He obtained sworn affidavits from Chef Bastion and Andy. He collected medical records and expert opinions. He compiled a case file that was absolutely damning. And my family? They thought I was healing. They thought I was processing the trauma. They thought I was deciding whether to forgive and forget. My mother sent flowers, expensive arrangements that I immediately donated to the hospital. My father called twice, leaving rambling voicemails about not letting this tear the family apart. And Sloan sent a text message. "Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't respond to any of them. My silence wasn't forgiveness. It was the quiet before the storm. It was the moment when you hold your breath and aim carefully. Because you only get one shot. And when Mr. Lewis called on day 19 to tell me the mediation was scheduled for day 21, exactly 3 weeks after the incident, I smiled for the first time since the poisoning. "Perfect," I whispered into the phone, my voice still hoarse, but getting stronger every day. "Let's end this." It took 3 weeks for the swelling to subside enough that I could speak without pain, and for my body to stabilize enough that I could sit upright for more than an hour without my heart racing like a trapped bird. That's how long it took for Mr. Lewis to compile every scrap of evidence into a legal file so airtight that even the most expensive defense attorney in the state would advise their client to settle. That's how long my family waited before they tried to sweep attempted murder under the rug like it was a wine stain on expensive carpet. The mediation room smelled like lemon furniture polish and desperation. It was one of those corporate spaces designed to look neutral: beige walls, a long oak table, leather chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. The kind of room where million-dollar deals died quietly, where careers ended with a signature instead of a scene. I arrived early with Mr. Lewis, my hands still trembling slightly from the medication I'd be on for the next 6 months. The doctors said the tremors would fade. I wasn't sure I wanted them to. They were a reminder of what had almost been taken from me. Sloan walked in 12 minutes late. Because of course she did. Even now, she couldn't resist the power play of making everyone wait. She wore a dove gray dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair pulled back in a soft chignon that screamed innocent victim. The makeup was perfect, just enough to look put together, not so much that she seemed callous. But it was her expression that made my stomach turn. That carefully practiced look of remorse. Eyes just slightly wider than usual. Lips pressed together in what was supposed to be anguished restraint. I'd seen that face 1,000 times growing up. It was the face she made when she wanted something. When she needed someone to believe her. When she was about to lie so smoothly that even she might believe it. Mom and Dad flanked her like bodyguards. Dad's jaw was set in that stubborn way that meant he'd already decided how this was going to go. Mom kept glancing at me with eyes that held something I'd never seen before: fear. Maybe mixed with a desperate kind of pleading. They looked at me the way people look at bomb timers, counting down. "Sailor," Mom started. Her voice doing that soft, soothing thing she used to do when I was little and had scraped my knee. "Honey, we're so glad you're feeling better." I didn't respond. Mr. Lewis had coached me. Speak only when necessary. Let the evidence do the talking. Don't let them manipulate your emotions. I folded my hands on the table, felt the cool wood beneath my palms, and waited. Sloan leaned forward, and right on cue, her eyes began to glisten. "Sailor, Her voice cracked perfectly. A hairline fracture in porcelain. "I need you to know how sorry I am. I swear. I only thought you'd get an itchy rash or something. Maybe your throat would get a little scratchy. I just wanted to tease you a bit, you know? Get you to loosen up. Stop being so serious all the time." She reached across the table like she wanted to take my hand. I pulled mine back. "I didn't know," she continued. And now there were actual tears, impressive, really. "I didn't know you would almost die. If I'd known, I never would have stopped." The word came out harder than I intended. Sharp enough that everyone flinched. My mother jumped in immediately. Her own version of damage control. "Sailor, please. Your sister made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But she didn't mean for things to go this far. After all, she didn't think it would be this bad. Can't you just let it go? Let it go." As if my sister hadn't watched me convulse on a restaurant floor. As if she hadn't put crab fat oil, into my soup and then sat there, wine glass in hand, waiting to see what would happen. As if I didn't think it would be this bad was somehow a defense for poisoning someone. Dad cleared his throat. His voice taking on that paternal weight that used to make me fall in line as a kid. "Sailor, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens, we are your only family, aren't we? Family forgives. Family moves forward." Something inside me cracked, but not the way they wanted. I felt it in my chest. That final tether snapping clean. The obligation. The guilt. The desperate childhood wish that someday they'd choose me first. All of it fell away like dead weight. My voice came out shaking, but not from weakness. From rage. From grief. From the sudden, dizzying clarity of someone who'd just stepped out of a burning building and could finally see the sky. "No." Sloan's perfectly crafted expression flickered. "No. I don't want a family like this." I looked at each of them in turn. Sloan with her designer victimhood. Mom with her enabler's desperation. Dad with his patriarch's entitlement. I absolutely will not let it go. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the wall clock ticking. Mr. Lewis chose that moment to open his briefcase. The snap of the lock sounded like a judge's gavel. "Miss Cole," he said, addressing Sloan with the kind of clinical coldness that made it clear there were no diminutives here. No sisterly nicknames. No family ties that would soften what came next. You are a PR director. You've built a career on understanding optics, on manipulating narratives, on knowing exactly how actions will be perceived. He pulled out a document, slid it across the table. Which means you are smart enough to know the boundary between a prank and attempted manslaughter. Sloan's face went white. That's not. I didn't. We have testimony from Chef Bastion confirming that you specifically requested crab fat oil be added to your sister's soup. Mr. Lewis's voice never rose. Never wavered. We have testimony from Andy, the server, confirming that you personally ensured the soup went to your sister's place setting. We have toxicology reports confirming the presence of shellfish proteins in Miss Sailor Cole's system at concentrations consistent with deliberate contamination. He pulled out another document. Then another. We have your text messages to Chef Bastion from 3 days before the dinner, asking about ingredients that could cause a reaction. We have your internet search history. How much shellfish causes allergic reaction? Can you hide crab oil in soup? Symptoms of severe allergic reaction. Each piece of evidence landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. This was premeditated, Mr. Lewis said, which elevates it beyond reckless endangerment. The DA's office has indicated they would pursue charges of aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Given the evidence of planning, you're looking at 8 years in a state correctional facility. The color drained from my parents' faces. Sloan started shaking her head, fast, frantic. No, that's not, I didn't mean. Alternatively, Mr. Lewis continued, his tone shifting just slightly, like a door opening a crack. My client is willing to settle this matter civilly. We will forego criminal prosecution in exchange for full compensation for medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Dad found his voice. How much? Mr. Lewis looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. $900,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. That's insane. Sloan's careful composure shattered completely. I don't have that kind of money. Nobody our age has that kind of. You have a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights, valued at approximately $400,000, Mr. Lewis recited without looking at notes. You have jewelry, a vehicle, investment accounts. Your parents have retirement funds, home equity. He leaned forward. The alternative is prison time, a criminal record, and civil liability that could follow you for decades. This settlement includes a comprehensive release of liability and a non-disclosure agreement that protects your reputation. You get to keep your freedom and whatever dignity you have left. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad stared at the table like the wood grain might rearrange itself into a solution. Sloan looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in our lives. I saw the moment she understood this wasn't her baby sister anymore. This wasn't the girl who'd swallow every slight, who'd make herself smaller so Sloan could shine brighter. This was someone who'd nearly died and decided that survival wasn't enough. I wanted restitution. I wanted consequences. I wanted everything she'd used to hurt me turned against her. You can't do this, she whispered. I met her gaze steady. I can. I am. My parents looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen directed at me before. Fear. And underneath it? Hatred. The kind of hatred you reserve for someone who's broken the unspoken rules, who's refused to play their assigned role. I looked away. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. It took 45 minutes of negotiation, of my father trying to argue the amount down, of my mother crying, of Sloan alternating between rage and desperation. But in the end, the math was simple. $900,000 or 8 years in prison. They signed. I watched Sloan's hand shake as she put pen to paper, watched the careful signature that had probably graced 1,000 PR documents now binding her to financial ruin. Watched my parents sign as co-guarantors, their retirement security traded for their golden child's freedom. When it was done, when the papers were collected and the terms were set, full payment within 90 days, with the first installment due in 2 weeks, Sloan looked at me one last time. "I'm your sister," she said, voice hollow. "No," I replied, standing up, gathering my coat. "You were someone who tried to kill me. There's a difference." I walked out of that beige room, out of that building, into afternoon sunlight that felt like absolution. Behind me, I heard my mother crying. I heard my father's voice, angry now, saying my name like a curse. I didn't look back. The seasons had barely changed before news reached me through a former colleague who kept tabs on industry gossip that Sloan Cole was unemployed. The PR firm had let her go quietly, citing restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when it involves someone who'd burned as bright and as publicly as Sloan had. The whispers followed her. Unstable. Liability. That girl who poisoned her sister. She'd sold the Riverside Heights apartment at a loss, desperate for quick cash. The jewelry went to a consignment shop. The car leased was returned. My parents had withdrawn their entire pension fund and taken out a second mortgage on their house to make up the difference. The first payment had cleared. Then the second. Each one a chunk of the life Sloan had built on the foundation of everyone else's diminishment. I learned later, months later, from that same gossipy colleague about the engagement party. One of Sloan's old high school friends, someone who didn't run in PR circles and hadn't heard the stories. Sloan showed up in a borrowed dress, desperation hidden behind that same practiced smile. She'd found him at the cocktail hour. Richard. Something or other. Old money. Divorced. Lonely enough to be charmed by a beautiful woman who laughed at his jokes. It was classic Sloan, really. She'd always known how to read people, how to become exactly what they wanted. For 2 months, she played the role perfectly. Let him wine and dine her. Moved into his penthouse apartment in the financial district. Started posting carefully curated photos on social media. Look at me. I'm back. I'm fine. I'm better than ever. But you can't hide who you are forever. Eventually, the mask slips. He caught her lying about something small, where she'd gone to college, maybe. Or what she'd done for work. One lie unraveled into another. And another. Until he did what any sensible person would do. He started digging. What he found was the truth. Not the sanitized version Sloan had tried to sell. But the real story. A woman who'd poisoned her sister. A woman who'd been sued into financial oblivion. A woman who'd do anything, hurt anyone, to claw her way back to the top. He kicked her out. Not dramatically, from what I heard. Just coldly, efficiently. Had his assistant pack her things. Left them in the lobby. Changed the locks. The same way you'd remove any other threat from your life. Last I heard, Sloan was working for a telemarketing company in a strip mall across town. 40 hours a week in a fluorescent-lit room, reading. Scripts to people who hung up on her, making $12 an hour. Sometimes I wondered if she thought about that dinner party. If she lay awake at night in whatever cheap apartment she could afford now, thinking about the moment she decided that hurting me was worth the risk. I hoped she did. 1 year after the night I nearly died, I stood in my library. My library. The words still felt surreal, even after months of saying them. The building was a converted warehouse in the arts district, all exposed brick and enormous windows that let in cascading sheets of natural light. The air smelled like old paper and lemon oil, that particular perfume of preserved history. Rows of custom-built shelves lined the walls, each one holding volumes in various states of restoration. Some were pristine, waiting to be cataloged. Others were works in progress, spines carefully separated from text blocks, pages laid flat under weights, acid damage being painstakingly reversed with specialized solutions. This was my company, Coal Conservation and Restoration. I'd almost used a different last name, wanted to shed that final connection to my family. But Mr. Lewis had advised against it. Own it, he'd said. You're not the one who should be ashamed. The settlement money had been the seed. $900,000, minus legal fees, minus medical expenses, minus the cost of therapy I'd needed to process what my own sister had done to me. What remained was enough to lease the space, buy equipment, hire 2 junior conservators, and establish a reputation. Turned out, nearly dying had made me something of a legend in certain circles. The book conservator who'd almost been murdered, who'd survived and built an empire. It was morbid, maybe, but I didn't mind. People remembered me. People hired me. And Magnus Thorne had opened doors I'd never imagined walking through. He'd visited a month after the mediation, showed up at my tiny studio apartment with a contract already drawn up. My entire heritage library, he'd said, simply. 400 years of Thorne family documents, first editions, personal correspondence. I want you to preserve them. I'd asked why. Why trust me with something so valuable? His answer had been characteristically direct. Because you understand that some things are worth saving, and some things need to be cut out, like cancer. You know the difference. That contract alone was worth $200,000 a year for the next 5 years. It had given me credibility, attracted other high-net-worth clients, allowed me to expand faster than I'd dreamed. Now, a year later, my company was valued at $2.5 million. I walked through the library, trailing my fingers along spines, feeling the texture of leather and cloth and vellum. Each book was a small universe, a preserved fragment of someone's thoughts, someone's world. Some were damaged when they came to me, water stains, mold, pages eaten away by time and neglect and acid. I fixed them carefully, methodically, with patience and precision. I reversed the damage, stabilized what could be saved, and when necessary, made the hard decision to let go of what was too far gone. It was meditative work, solitary work. The kind of work that suited someone who'd learned that not all relationships could be repaired, that sometimes the healthiest thing you could do is seal away the toxic elements and build something new. My junior conservators, Emily and David, were in the back room working on a collection of 18th century letters. I could hear Emily's soft humming, the rustle of tissue paper, the quiet industry of people who loved what they did. I'd built this. Not with family money or family connections, but with the compensation for nearly being murdered. Every shelf, every tool, every carefully restored page was proof that I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and alchemized it into something beautiful. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Lewis. Final payment cleared. Case officially closed. The third and final installment. Sloan's debt, or rather my parents' debt on Sloan's behalf, was paid in full. I stared at the message for a long moment, waiting to feel something. Triumph, maybe? Or closure. Instead, I just felt quiet. I walked to the window, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Sloan was probably sitting in a telemarketing cubicle, reading a script, being hung up on. My parents were probably in their mortgaged house, resenting me, telling each other I'd overreacted, that family should forgive. They were wrong, but it didn't matter anymore. Their opinions were like voices from a country I'd emigrated from, distant, irrelevant, someone else's problem. I turned back to my library, to the restoration table where a 16th century manuscript waited for my attention. The pages were brittle, edges darkened with age, but the text was still legible, still valuable, still worth saving. I sat down, pulled on my cotton gloves, selected my tools with the precision of a surgeon. This was what I did now. I preserved what was precious. I eliminated harmful agents, whether they were acid on paper or toxicity in blood relations. I carefully opened the manuscript, began assessing the damage, planning the restoration. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like golden snow. My life was whole now. Brilliant. Built on the ashes of the career of the sister who tried to kill me. And for the first time in 26 years, I was exactly where I needed to be.